So let's look at the basics first, right? So for the basics, right, I want to focus on the notation firstly. So the notation, just be comfortable with what these vectors actually look like when they're written, right? There's a few different ways we can do. For example, our common way is when we have an A with a little squiggle underneath, let's call that tilde. You may have also seen these capital ones with an arrow at the top, so saying I'm going from A to B, and that little arrow that indicates it's a vector, it's a line with an arrow at the end. And one that's less commonly seen, but still fair game, is this letter A here. But you can see that I've tried to write it a bit thick. It's actually bolded. So when you're typing it, it's quite doable. But when you're writing it, not so feasible. So we tend to stay away from that. But just be aware that they could do that, right? And the last one is something written like this. And this is what we call component form. You've got these two squiggle lines here, which look very similar to that. In fact, these are actually vectors themselves. So what this means, component form, is that we're breaking up into its horizontal and vertical components. So for example, if I had a vector like this, if I had 3i plus 2j, what that's saying is I've got a horizontal component, this I vector, and the j one is my vertical component. So it's literally saying I've got 3 of these horizontal vectors. These, we call them like unit vectors because it's 3 of them going alongside like that. So it goes up to 3. And I've got 2 j vectors. So I've got the 2 of the vertical ones. That goes up to 2 there. And basically when we add vectors visually, what we're doing is that we're just putting it up to tip to tail, see where they line up. And so where you started from to where you end up, that's our vector that we create. So that's the vector 3i plus 2j written in component form there. So these arrows actually aren't drawn. That's just a visual cue to help you visualize how we actually create that vector there. Right? So that's how we create that. And that's what the component form actually means. It's getting these little unit vectors and then putting them up alongside each other, tip to tail, and then seeing the vector that we create. Obviously, we can go all around the Cartesian plane as well, okay? All right, so that's the notation that you need to be comfortable with. I also want to give you an example for how we're going to look at the different basic questions and also the operations that we can look at.